Hey everybody, this is Deb with Truthification Chronicles, and I've got a letter for you. Yeah, you may have actually heard about this on Fox News if you watched any of the interviews with Lindsey Graham, but it's always better to see it in person, isn't it, than to be told about it. So that's my policy on it. So we're going to read through this, and I will leave all of the links below so you can share them and share them proudly. Here we go. This was written by Lindsey Graham, and he wrote it as the chairman on the judiciary for the Senate, so it is kind of official. And he wrote it on the 29th, and it is to the Honorable William P. Barr. So let's see what it has to say. Dear Attorney General Barr, since March 28th, 2018, now I got to stop right here because I want to remind you what happened on March 29th of 2018. And that was this letter right here by Jeff Sessions, who was at the time the AG. And he wrote this letter to Grassley, Goodlatte, and Gowdy. Grassley at the time was the chairman of the judiciary in the Senate, which is what Lindsey Graham is now. And then Goodlatte was the House chairman of the judiciary, and then Gowdy was the chairman of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. Okay, so those three men were complaining to Sessions. They had written Sessions like 3 or 4 times. I don't know. I've done videos on this, and they wrote to him saying, we need to have a second special counsel. We've got to get this done because there are things that are not right. And they wanted a second special counsel. They kept begging Sessions to appoint one, but he didn't because he did something much, much smarter. He wrote this letter to him to say, guys, I got it under control. And when you read through this letter, I highly recommend it. If you haven't read this letter, it's really important because what he did in this letter is he said, you know what? I'm already on it because, see, a special counsel doesn't have very much power. Well, they have power, but they don't have a lot of staff. And, even Mueller had, 25, lawyers working for him. He really did not have a whole lot of staff. And then he had some FBI agents and so forth. But what Sessions did here was he took the Inspector General, which is Horowitz, and he paired him up with Huber, who was a U.S. attorney. Now, if you remember, the Inspector General cannot prosecute anybody. All he can do is recommend prosecution for people. And so, and he really only looks at what's going on and compares people's behavior to what the rules and procedures for the Department of Justice are, because he's only the Inspector General for the Department of Justice. Every department has their own Inspector General. So this letter right here was Sessions saying, okay, I know he can't prosecute, but I'm going to pair him up with U.S. Attorney Huber, and U.S. attorneys can prosecute. So that's why this has been going on. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there who are saying, whoa, but we don't know anything. We don't think Huber's doing anything. No, guys, calm down. He is doing stuff. But the very fact that that was going on since about November of 2017, and this letter didn't come out until March 29th of 2018, means that they were working on things for quite a while and nobody knew anything about it. You see, that's how it's supposed to work, because you're not supposed to have leaks. The only way we know about a lot of this stuff is because there are leaks. If there weren't leaks, we wouldn't know. And so we're not hearing things from Huber and his team because Huber hasn't been having any leaks. And the reason that Sessions paired Huber up with Horowitz was because Horowitz has the investigative power. He has a staff of 470 people. Compare that to Mueller again, when he had, 25? Huge difference. Can you imagine what you could do with a staff of 470 compared to a staff of 25? I mean, it's a big difference. And so this whole thing was set up so that Huber and Horowitz could be working behind the scenes without people really knowing what they were doing. And they addressed it it actually says right here that they addressed all the things that these 3 men had brought up to Sessions. And they had, letters that had lists. I did the videos, and so I've seen the documents. They had lists of things that they wanted Sessions to address. Well, he did. And I know there's people that say Sessions didn't do anything, but I'm sorry, guys. He did. He set up a lot of infrastructure that had to be done so that we could build on it with Barr. And if it wouldn't have been for Sessions, Barr would have to be doing that now, and it would delay, justice even further. And I know some of you are very impatient, but you have to understand the scope of this, the magnitude of what was going on and the corruption and who all was involved. I mean, this wasn't just a handful of people. This is huge. And the corruption in our government is not just a few people doing bad things. There are a lot of people doing bad things. And the problem that Sessions had was he pretty much got dropped into a big pit of vipers, and they had to do a lot of cleaning. They had to get rid of some of those people, and it really had to have the stage set. It took time because it's so huge. And we've got only one chance to do this right, folks. So all the T's have to be crossed. All the I's have to be dotted. Everything has to be done perfectly. Because if it's not, it's going to be, oh no, they're just doing this as political hit job. Okay, we can't have that because that will divide the country. But if it comes out and people are seeing the corruption, and more people are seeing it all the time. I mean, of course, what we're seeing on the mainstream media is not saying that. They're defending, the idea that everyone hates Trump. I heard somebody just say that the other day, post it on Twitter, and it's like, really? Are you that crazy? I mean, no, that's not the truth. Trump is not going to lose big time, and there are a lot of people standing behind him. So with this particular strategy, it was to set things up. I think from the start, Sessions was not the person chosen to actually go on with the prosecution phase of this. And I think Barr is probably the person who is going to do that at this point. And that's what we are waiting for, but we've got to have everything set up right first. I mean, it takes time to build cases. And so that's what this letter was kind of setting up. And Barr has been able to build on the infrastructure that is in this letter. Again, if you haven't read it, please take the time to do so. It's not all that long. It's about 4 pages. Well worth reading. Or go watch one of my other videos because I go through it. So, anyway, since March 28, 2018, the department's Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, has been conducting an investigation into the department's and the Federal Bureau of Investigation's compliance with legal requirements and with applicable department and FBI policies and procedures in applications filed with the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, FISC, related to Carter Page. According to Inspector General Horowitz, that investigation is nearing completion. Now remember, Horowitz has already been busy doing things. He put out an IG report on Andrew McCabe, and since then he recommended prosecution for McCabe, and there is a grand jury impaneled working on the McCabe thing. We're going to see a prosecution there. And then he put out the one a year ago in June, the big one that had a lot of information in there on how they were handling the Clinton investigation and everything. And then he put out the one just recently on Comey, and he's got another one that is coming up very soon, sometime in September. It was going to come out, I think, in July, but, things started really escalating at that point. And I think a lot of people that will be named in it were starting to have the fear of God in them. And so they all decided they wanted to go and talk to Horowitz again and maybe change some of their testimony. Okay? So that has delayed this one coming out, but it will be coming out. And when it does, the people who are in the know about it seem to think it's going to be really bad and that there will be prosecutions recommended. And then it'll be up to the DOJ to implement those. And I do believe that's what's going to happen. So anyway, it goes on. It says, in order for the Inspector General to be able to present the most complete results of his investigation to Congress and the American people, certain documents will need to be declassified and released to the public. I urge you to declassify all documents the Inspector General identifies as appropriate for declassification as much as possible, without harming national security. Now, if you remember, Trump gave Barr the power to declassify all of this stuff. So yeah, all Barr has to do is say, I think that needs to be declassified, and put it out there. And we know from the Mueller report that Barr is going to redact the least amount possible. So I intend to see almost all of these things with very few redactions. From my review, the following classified documents, at a minimum, should be declassified in order to provide a complete picture of what went on with the FISA process as it relates to Carter Page and the Trump campaign. So these are the things he's asking for. Let's look at what he says. Number 1, all documents and communications originally shared with the Gang of Eight in May 2018 related to the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election, including any transcripts or summaries of transcripts of conversations between George Papadopoulos and confidential informants. Okay, now we need to actually look at the Gang of Eight. You may not know much about that particular term, but here's our current Gang of Eight. And this is how it works. They take 2 members of Congress that are the chairman and the ranking member for the United States House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. And currently that would be Adam Schiff and Devin Nunes. And we'll talk about what it was at the time in 2018 when all this came out. The second one is they take 2 more from the United States Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. So you've got both of those, the intel committees on both House and Senate. And you have Richard Burr and Mark Warner on that. And they were the same last time. But again, I will show you that in a minute. And then they also take the Speaker of the House and the Minority Leader, which means we have Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy right now. And then the leadership in the Senate, which is Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer. Okay, this is our current one. But what he's talking about is in May of 2018. And that would be this group right here. So, look at this group. And even though it's 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats, yeah, it's not 4 deep state players and 4 non-deep state players, is it? So, now, as far as I know, this Burr guy, I have not seen a lot of positive about him, and I wouldn't trust him. You know, I don't think he's full deep state. Well, he might be. But he's a Republican, but again, wouldn't trust him. McConnell is mostly doing what he's supposed to. He's just sometimes a little wishy-washy, and he's very much of a, you know, he likes to be a member of Congress. So that is how he plays the game, the whole congressional game. So he sometimes doesn't want to expose some things just because of how it might affect things politically. But then Ryan, I think a lot of you know that Ryan did not do us any favors. I mean, he was a Republican, but his wife had some real fishy stuff going on. And yeah, don't trust Ryan. So who was the hero out of this group? Well, Nunes. And Nunes saw a lot of the stuff. Now, notice Feinstein was on this committee. She's not on there anymore. Okay. And so, yeah, they have, go back here. Whoops. Go back here again. You have Nancy Pelosi and you've got Chuck Schumer and Mark Warner and Adam Schiff. So those are the ones that are on it now. So, yeah, this group right here. In May of 2018, this group was presented with some documents and things about the FBI investigation into Crossfire Hurricane. But they should have been informed about it when it first happened. Now, the purpose of the Gang of Eight, in case you don't know, in Congress's oversight, they're going to see a lot of sensitive documents. And so instead of having that open to all Congress members, because, there's a lot in the House of Representatives, and then when you add in the Senate and everything, that's a lot of people. And if you want to keep things quiet, the least amount of people possible is wise. So what they did was they formed this Gang of Eight, and as you can see, it's 4 and 4. And they took them from those specific committees so that they would have some people who had the classification to be able to see a lot of these sensitive documents and to deal with sensitive matters like the FBI might be dealing with, or the CIA, or whatever. So these people were allowed to see things that the rest of the members of Congress have not seen. And then the members of Congress have seen things now that are classified at a different level they're not able to share with us. So, like, Gowdy is not in this group, but he has seen documents because of his role that he was on the Oversight Committee. He's seen things that we can't see, and he can't tell us about, but he knows what's in those documents. Now, Devin Nunes has seen a lot of stuff, not only as a member of the Gang of Eight, but he has also seen the other stuff that like Gowdy and those guys have seen. So he has quite a bit of the puzzle here. And especially with this Gang of Eight, he knows what's been going on. And when this happened in May of 2018, this is when they first introduced the Gang of Eight to this whole counterintelligence thing they had going on about Trump, the investigation. But because of their oversight, the FBI should have shared that with this Gang of Eight as soon as they started it, even before the 2016 election. So, see, there are things that happened that should not have been happening, and the ones in charge, like Lindsey Graham right now, he knows it. He knows what happened. And he understands that there were things that should not have been that way, like this right here. So he wants to have all the documents and communications that the Gang of Eight got to see, because he believes that the American people needs to see those. And it's all, transcripts of conversations between George Papadopoulos and confidential informants. Because remember, George Papadopoulos was being used as a pawn. They were trying to get him to do something wrong so they could claim he was, had these Russian connections and everything. And that's how they were going to surveil the Trump team. Well, it wasn't working so well with him. But they want to get that information. He thinks that needs to be declassified. Also, the applications for FISA warrants and any renewals thereof for Carter Page, which we've already seen, or anyone else associated with the Trump campaign. Now, I've heard that not only was there one on Carter Page, but there was also one on Mike Flynn, George Papadopoulos, and Manafort. So I think there were actually 4 different FISA warrants. However, there could have been more. I mean, we don't know how many there were. So, that's the problem when you have a secret court. This is the problem with it. But the Gang of Eight should probably have been informed of any investigations like this that were going on. Now, this next one says he wants this declassified. The letter from the department to the FISA court filed pursuant to Rule 13A of the FISA Court Rules of Procedure. This one is fun. You got to see this, okay? So, what is that? Well, let's look at it. Rule 13 has to do with correction of misstatement or omission, disclosure of noncompliance. And look at A. A says correction of material facts. If the government discloses that a submission to the court contained a misstatement or omission of material fact, the government, in writing, must immediately inform the judge to whom the submission was made of the misstatement or omission, any necessary correction, the facts and circumstances relevant to the misstatement or omission, any modifications the government has made or proposes to make, and how it will implement any authority or approval granted by the court, and how the government proposes to dispose of or treat any information obtained as a result of the misstatement or omission. So in other words, when you use the Steele dossier and you claim that it's verified and true, which they all had to do when they signed their names on the FISA warrant application, that's what they were swearing to, that it was true and verified. And we all know it wasn't true and it wasn't verified. So that should have been corrected as soon as they found out. How long did they know it was not true and wasn't verified? Well, they signed it 4 times. You know, they had the original and then 3 renewals. So, yeah. In other words, they did not comply with this. And so Lindsey Graham wisely asked for that. He says, well, now surely they knew the Steele dossier wasn't verified, so there should be a letter in there that corrects that, right? There's not. Yeah, he knows there's not too. And that's why he put it in there. Any opinions from the FISA court related to the Carter Page FISA or other Trump campaign-related FISAs? See, there are other Trump campaign-related FISAs. There are, I am sure. As to who they really are, I'm not sure, but I really think Flynn was one of them. And so, yeah, they want the opinions. Now, remember, the whole thing with this Carter Page FISA was they really didn't accuse Carter Page of doing anything because the guy was never arrested. He's always out there walking free. What they wanted to do, though, is the 2-hop thing, because when they got this warrant on Carter Page, they could spy on him, and then they could also spy on anyone he contacted and then anyone that person contacted. So again, if it was Carter Page and he contacted, say, Don Jr., and then Don Jr., of course, talked to his dad, they could easily get to Trump that way. And that was really what they wanted to do. That was what they expected. The problem was Carter Page didn't do what he was supposed to do. Well, he didn't do what they wanted him to do. They were trying to manipulate him and Papadopoulos, and it backfired on him because the people were too honest about it. They didn't fall for the traps. And so he also wants to see the chart that shows the FBI's attempts to verify the allegations in the Steele dossier. Oh, won't that be fun to see? Yeah, let's see that chart. We want to see their attempts to verify the allegations, which they just never did. They couldn't do it because they were not true. Any FBI or department documents or communications discussing Christopher Steele's credibility and or biases, or the FBI or the department's knowledge of Steele's contacts with members of the media. Yeah. So they're supposed to release any of these documents, declassify them. Do they exist? They might not. Or there might be some documents that show otherwise, which is what I think is probably going to happen. FD 302s or other interview summaries related to anyone at FBI or the department who interacted or accepted documents or communications from Christopher Steele, Glenn Simpson, Fusion GPS, Michael Sussman, Perkins Coie, or the Democratic National Committee, or anyone associated with the DNC. So this should get really interesting because I'm sure there were some communications and documents going back and forth between these people. Yeah. And if you read the Mueller report, you noticed that Fusion GPS really wasn't mentioned in there. So, yeah, they kind of avoided that. The FBI's confidential human source reports and related documents and communications for Christopher Steele. You see, the thing is, there's a paper trail. There is a paper trail because they had to have it. Well, let's find out what those FBI reports say, okay? We want to find out. And documents and communications related to the defensive briefings given to both the Clinton and Trump campaigns. Because, if there is some outside interference trying to, hit us in our elections, then there would be a briefing given to both of the candidates. Well, did they have those briefings? I don't think so. At least not for the Trump campaign. And really, you got to remember that this whole thing was to keep Trump from becoming president, and then once he was president, to undermine his presidency. But something else that it's doing is it's keeping people's minds off of domestic interference with our election. And so I think there's been a lot of domestic interference with our election over the years, and that needs to come out as well. But we got to get this taken care of first. So I don't know. Will the other come out before the 2020 election? I sure hope so, because I would just love to see it be an actually fair election. I can't wait. Anyway, so that's what he has to say there. And a copy went to, of course, Dianne Feinstein, because she's the ranking member, and then Horowitz, who is the IG for the Department of Justice. So that's the document we have right there. And I think it's a good one to share with people. Let them know what kinds of things he's expecting to be declassified, because those are going to be huge. And I really think a lot of this declassification thing it has to come out in little bits and pieces, because when there are huge document dumps, people tend not to look at them. If it's something smaller, people will absorb it. So that's the thing we need to have happen, because we need people to see what's in these documents so they will understand that this is not a political hit job in any way, shape, or form. These people did illegal things and need to be held accountable if we're going to restore our rule of law. So anyway, that's what I've got for you on this one. All the links, as always, will be down below in the description. You may have to click like a little triangle or some dots or something to make that description pop open, but they'll be down there and you'll be able to take those and use these documents. What I hope you're doing is you take this and you show it to people. If you've got a Facebook page, if you've got Twitter, if you're on Instagram, whatever the case is, try to use these to tell other people what's really going on, because the more we see documents like this, the more we'll understand that it really is a serious problem that needs to be addressed, and that some people need to go to jail in order for this to be rectified. Okay? And it should never, ever happen to another president. Ever. So that's what I've got for you on this one. I want to thank you for stopping by, and I'll see y'all later.